Welcome to the Athletic Performance Podcast, a conversation for all things performance related. I'm your host, Ryan Patrick, and today we're going to do a deep dive on everything speed, power, and strength. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Today's guest is known as the Walk More King on Instagram, Mr. Dean Guedo. Dean and I riff on a number of topics today, ranging from high-energy Flux nutrition, balancing mobility, strength, technique in the sport of jiu-jitsu, the challenging downside of being incredibly strong when it comes to sporting movement, performance anxiety and mental strategies for competition prep, and even into the movement models and the application of simple techniques. Dean is quite comical, which makes him a pleasure to interview and chat with. This conversation flows pretty effortlessly between topics, and while we don't dive deep into any particular topic, you can hear many of the industry-wide challenges we discuss on a variety of topics. If you're looking for an easy listen with some viewpoints from two well-seasoned coaches, this interview will deliver, and it might even get your wheels turning. Next, before you listen, please mark your calendar for my training entitled Speed Simplified, Building Fast Athletes Faster, on October 1st. I'll be doing a deep dive into how you assess, correct, and improve speed with your athletes. If you're a coach in the private sector who wants to be the go-to performance guy in your area, this workshop is a must attend. Message me on Instagram at Coach Ryan Patrick or email athleticpod@gmail.com. That's athleticpod, P-O-D, @gmail.com. Now, without further ado, Dean Guedo. But anyway, I want to hear about the tournament, man. The Worlds. How was it?
It's good. It's always funny when I talk about like jiu-jitsu worlds because you can say it multiple ways, but it's really World Masters. But you leave out the world, the Masters part because no one knows what that is, and I just want them to assume I'm the world champion of the world, as we know it. But no, it was good.
Masters class or not, man, that's where all the guys with the dad strength are.
Well, that's kind of where so the tournament was awesome, but I think that's I have no reference point other than adults divisions are super tough because they're young, but they're also young and at the same size. I feel so strong just because I don't feel old and I don't feel like I have old man strength, but I understand it when I feel what young man strength is, which it's just conditioning and effort. Where I'm the opposite. It's strength, and I want the least amount of effort because I just don't have it. But yeah, man, a tournament like that. So the reason why I'm pretty proud of it is that at the World Tournament, just everyone shows up, and so there was no easy matches. And obviously, it would be nice if they were easy and I won, but it feels way better when I pretty much took out the 4, 3, and 1 seed just because I was unranked. So I basically had to fight my way in through all the good guys. And so winning it was amazing because then I was like, okay, I fit in. Not that you don't know if you fit in, but I feel like I legitimately fit in, at least at purple belt, because it was so hard. And so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where to go. I just have to get better now. But right now I feel pretty fucking good, to be honest.
Dude, I would. And I've kind of hesitated doing some of those bigger tournaments like that because I'll be honest, I see some of the highlights on Flow or IBJJF, and they've got these blue belts at World Pan Ams and shit. I'm like, that's a fucking blue belt. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So my assumption is there's a lot of sandbaggers who are trying to just pad the rankings. So for you to pull up and sweep through the way that you did was, man, yeah. I was so impressed.
Well, thank you. Because blue belt was way harder, it felt like, for that exact reason. I don't know. I'm pretty new to the sports, 3.5 years. So I don't know the whole culture. I didn't grow up in it. But I know there's probably some sandbagging going on. But the divisions are just so big. And even, comparing my skill level now, I'm starting to actually learn jiu-jitsu. And, figure out how to slow things down, which is, a fairly new thing. I want to say the last 6 months. And then I think, what the hell was I doing before? And then I go to this tournament and I watch the blue belts. I'm like, oh, I was doing that. I was just going nuts. I don't even know how I made it through matches. It's not even a comparison, which is so it's are they crazy good or are they just bad? And they're all the same level, just going crazy. So I think if you watch those tournaments, the blue and the white belt matches, and some of the purple ones, the smaller guys, are just they're almost more spectator friendly because it's just shit's happening the whole time.
Yeah. My last tournament, I did so much conditioning for it. I was like, all right, I know
Yeah.
these blue belts, they like to go. I mean, I spent 12 weeks like just fucking crushing myself on the
Yeah.
assault bike, like more work than I'd ever done. My aerobic capacity was probably the best it's ever been. It had to be. And I go to the tournament, and the first match I go into an overtime, and I was waxed.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to throw up after that. I could barely keep up. And I mean, it was just nonstop. We were just moving constantly. So I mean, imagine just a 5-6 minute assault bike as hard as you can. I mean, like I'm supposed to like pull up and like I'm on a 1 or 2 match break and then I'm back in. I'm like, I'm not gonna be recovered for this.
No.
And I got in that second match and just like you, I mean, I'm even less experienced in the sport. I get in there and like second nature was like I started pulling on lapels and doing all this weird stuff. Where after the fact, I'm like, my God, like what the fuck was I doing? Like this
You
is the
just
worst. Like, yeah, it's just I mean, it was just Jacksonian dissolution, whatever you want to call it. Like I just regressed to like this amateur, and it was
so like I had
terrible.
the exact same experience. The problem was, and this isn't like to be like cocky, is I won. So at American Nationals, I did E and Nogi. I actually pulled out of my last match, so I didn't win, but I won all my matches I did. But I had the same experience, is that I'm in good condition. Like I know how to train. Like I'm in the best shape of my life. And then I
Right.
roll up to the American Nationals. My first match, I'm fucking dead. Like it was like a 5 minute match, and like we were standing, but it was like we weren't doing anything. But I was so tired. And
Mm-hmm.
then I go to the Nogi one, and I had to face the number one guy at the world at the time. And like I'm just doing exactly what you said. I'm just moving the whole way. And like I ended up winning on like an advantage or maybe two advantages, but gassed. Like I hurt my knee, I had to pull out. I was like, man, like what the hell? And there's two things. So my coach was like, yeah, you're just basically doing a bunch of stuff you don't need to do. That was one. And then like mentally though, like I had so much pressure on myself that I could kind of grind out a win, but I lost
Mm-hmm.
everything I didn't do. I wasn't loose. I didn't do any of the moves I do. I was just kind of hammering. I was tense. Like you know the feeling with the forearms and everything. It was just like
Mm-hmm.
instant to the point where like it didn't make any sense. So I've spent the whole year basically kind of working with Jeb a little bit. He's within our network, but like literally just on the sports performance mental side of things and kind of redefining what training looks like in terms
Yeah.
of like mindset going into it. And then kind of like same thing with the matches was like pretty much no one cares except for you. Like, and as teammates and watching people, you can kind of relate with it is that you don't actually care if your teammates win or lose. Like obviously you care if they win, but if they lose, it's not a big deal. And so if you take that weight off your shoulders, I ended up feeling like I could just kind of roll into there and like just do what I do. And then my
Yeah.
conditioning cleared up. So it was almost between that. So American Nationals was June, World Nogi was December. And although I lost, I won a match and then I lost the decision. I felt great. Like my conditioning was there. I felt loose. I felt like I'd go like 10 matches. And like that to me was a success because I just kind of redefined how like I said, trained and approach training and approach matches. And then it cleared up all that stuff. I still was tired and anxious, but it was like it was like appropriate, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to dive into that a little bit because I think the performance anxiety that I get now it's just a massive
Yeah.
adrenaline dump. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm talking like 150, 160 before I even touch the mats.
So I have the data on that. It was my Whoop. Whatever you think about Whoop, whatever, but at least it tracks heart rate. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't track it during this one, but afterwards, yeah, like my adrenaline dump. I was at like 140 to like 120 for like 5 hours post. Like that's insane. Like, and I was literally felt like I was just a zombie doing nothing, and my heart rate's up. But yeah. Anyways, that's a real thing.
Just Yeah, man. I mean, I'm just buzzing. It's to the point. I was laughing because I saw you post a story yesterday about doing peanut butter and jellies, and that's about the only thing I can stomach on that day. I mean, it's to the point where I get like almost like an anorexia, where I just don't
Yeah.
want to eat because it's like everything's gonna upset my stomach.
Well, and it's not like I'm a pro at this stuff. Like I obviously won a purple belt tournament,
Sure.
and Masters 2 super heavy. But like a lot of people listening, and yourself, like, I played team sports my whole life. I played college football. Like I had anxiety somewhat, but in football, like after kickoff, you get rocked or you rock someone or whatever. Like it's kind of just gone. It's like, and with
it's always after that first hit.
Yeah. But with jiu-jitsu, like if you get an adrenaline dump and you get fucked because there's no break afterwards because you're just in a fight and you lose, you're out of the tournament. Like the game's done. That would be like the equivalent of like missing a tackle, your first play of the game, and then they're like, yeah, you're like, the game's over, you lost. Like, and so it's not really that helpful to like have that massive adrenaline dump and a performance like depreciation, I guess, because of it. You kind of have to be able to weather that a little bit, or at least control it, because again, if you can make it through your first match, which I can usually figure it out sometimes, but then what do you do for the next few? You know what I mean? And so, again, that wasn't something I had experienced in team sports the same way, because the team would pick up the slack or whatever, right? If you had you would maybe miss one play, but you get 80 plays in a game or 50 plays in a game.
Right. Yeah, completely different. So you said you did a lot of work as far as just how you approach training, how you prep for the meets. What were some of the big changes for you?
Yeah, so one of the things was I read a book. Again, Jeb, one of my business partners, but good friends. He's into like a lot of the mental side of things, especially with like as nutrition coaches. So I'm a nutrition coach.
For sure.
He's a nutrition coach that does kind of doesn't use the classic nutrition macros counting. He's kind of more on the mental side of things. And so applying some of those concepts with sports performance was what I did. And one of the concepts was, it's called Internal Family Systems, just IFS for short. There's a book called No Bad Parts, but it's kind of utilizing, if you ever seen the movie Switch, or Switch, where he has like the different personalities. It's kind of like, and then he kind of snaps into a different one, but not that this is that, like it's not like schizophrenia, but it's kind of like you have all these versions of you that come out at different times, and more or less, and they use it in eating and trauma and all this stuff. Like, I'm not going to go to that, but for sports, there's certain, I guess, identities that will take over, and they serve a purpose, meaning that there's nothing that's bad. It's just that sometimes they've run their course, meaning if you use like aggression to get through a tough time and you were successful, you'll kind of dip back into that to a point where like aggression isn't going to help in jiu-jitsu if that's your main one, right? Because especially when there's a 5-minute match and whatever, is like you kind of assign the roles or reassign roles or have like a conversation within yourself, all these different parts to have an outcome that's more aligned with where you're at, or for the sport is how I used it. The sport, the training, and then the matches was trying to redefine, I guess, your inner superhero or demon or whatever the fuck you want to call it, but appropriately assigning it and then identifying ones that are more helpful. So in my case was, I'm super tense. My coach, he said this right before the match, but he's like, I was like, yeah, training's not that fun. He's like, yeah, you're the most stressed out person I've ever met. And that's saying a lot. And I was like, damn. But part of my work that I've been doing is like trying to be not like the opposite of stressed, like trying to have some fun as opposed to thinking winning at all costs is helpful, but essentially assigning that more of a predominant role in my training camp. Because if I'm riding high the whole time, kind of like your experience with the match, but if I treat every training session like that, like I just get hurt. And I was getting hurt up at every competition, probably a month out, partially because I was treating every training session like I'm in a life or death match. And so as much as that helps me, it's not that helpful until I need it, which is kind of in a scramble or a submission escape or a blast double. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, hey, when we're getting grips and there's nothing that's going to happen and I just gas out my grips because I decided I was going to have a massive adrenaline aggression dump. So it was kind of like that process was individual to me, but that's kind of what I did. And I signed it in essentially blocks of training and then also like lead up to the matches. And then on game day, it would kind of have a different structure. But like, that's not training, but it kind of is, because at a certain point, if you're in shape, it doesn't really matter if you can't actually do the damn thing.
Yeah.
If we're talking about sports.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on this. So one, does it help you to go against some of the lower belts so that you can learn how to pace and slow down and just execute technically?
Yeah. Yeah, so I have a unique condition where we have a pretty small gym. And so, yes, the short answer is yes, but it's kind of forced upon me. I'm basically rolling with like 2 black belts and a brown belt. One's a multiple-time world champion. The other one's very competitive black belt, and then the other one's like he got like 3rd at world and brown belt. But they're all like super heavies or ultra heavies, and so I look at that as like my strength training. So like I'm in bad positions. I'm lifting weights, so to speak, to kind of build a resistance to the resistance, and then everyone else feels lighter. And then I utilize, we'll call it lower belts, but a lot of times it's people my level, or like in and around blue, purple belt, as like, does this stuff, can I work on it? And then if it works on the better guys, it probably works. And then if it works on my guys, I know it's more than likely going to work in competition, but and then the white belts, I utilize it to like fuck around.
Yeah, kind of learning things.
Like there's a testing round of like I need to try positions I really suck at, and then the middle of the pack, or like guys that are my level, I'll test to make sure it actually works. And then does it really, really work? It doesn't really matter if it works on a black belt, but if it does work on a black belt, it definitely works on a purple belt. And so I use that as a gauge. So yes, 100%. But that's kind of where you can alternate intensities. It's like I can't get crazy with if we look at from a training block, I can't have my intensity up with the black belts because they can match it and exceed it, and then I have nowhere to go from there. But I can go super intense with people close to mine because I also don't have to go above my threshold. I can control the pace, and then same thing with the white belts. I can kind of just choose what I want to do, and usually I don't go crazy because you'll just hurt them, and so you lose. I don't want to lose a training partner. But they also have a crazy intensity too. Like if anyone who's ever trained jiu-jitsu and you go with new guys, I almost stay away from a lot of the new bigger guys because I can just imagine what I was like. I was probably a terrible person to train. Like seeing red, can't control them. And so I'll only do that if I'm like, can I control that? Because if I can control that, I control someone who's better, but maybe less intense is kind of how I look at it.
Right. Yeah. What was the transition like into jiu-jitsu for you? Because one of the things you've described is, I think, a problem I run into, and maybe I would expect a lot of guys coming from our field, strength and conditioning, have this problem too. But if there's a problem, I generally want to solve it with more force.
Right.
And more aggression, right? That's the answer. And I've seen your videos. I mean, you deadlifted 700-800 pounds. So it's like, you know how to grind, you know how to put a little bit behind it, but it's also like the very thing that just completely obliterates your conditioning and capacity to do virtually anything, especially if you go against a guy who can just tie you down in the gi.
Yeah, and it's like anyone who's like done jiu-jitsu from our field probably has a similar experience. It's like, and it's nothing again. It's more of like jiu-jitsu as a culture. Their training and conditioning is fucking 100 years behind nutrition. So there's no real like guidance on how to like structure this thing, especially when you come and you don't know the sport. So I would say like 3 years, I'm starting to learn the sport. And that's why some of my training is actually more around the mental side of things. Because again, how much at a certain strength level, you're going to exceed its use at some point. So for me, actually, I had to learn real fast, probably within the first 3 months, that if I wanted to get good at jiu-jitsu. So this is like, I'm not just trying to do both. I was like, I'm just going to do jiu-jitsu. I found my strength training needed to basically cease to exist because, right, the allocator resources for me it was a technical jiu-jitsu problem, not a strength problem. And then I was like, let's just say I don't lift. What's the worst that can happen? I go from at the time I was deadlifting between 600 and 700 pounds regularly. Like that's not that useful because you know what's useful just as much as a 700 pound deadlift, a 300 pound deadlift, because that's the max I'm going to lift. So it was more, can I utilize the base that I built as a kind of, I can give away that base and still be stronger than most people and then allocate those resources to jiu-jitsu. So I took the opposite approach of using strength and conditioning to make my jiu-jitsu better. I was like, I'm already strong enough, which is like that's not a humble brag. I think that most people that are very active, even yourself, like you crushed that one event. I don't know. I can't even remember that one event you did, but it was like massive amounts of pull-ups and deadlifts.
Oh, the tactical strength.
Yeah, like 1,000% stronger than you need to be for any person you're going to go against. And so I took the opposite approach, which was like, can I keep that to a minimum? So just basically maintain, and then up my conditioning and up my jiu-jitsu. And so far, so good. Like, I mean, the experiment I think worked. I've obviously included training in. more recently I've kind of more included it, but I want the opposite of like cold turkey stop, which might not
Mm-hmm.
be what everyone thinks, but again, the people in our field anyways, if we start from that base, I don't know if it helps them much because the adaptations required for lifting are almost the opposite of the adaptations required for jiu-jitsu, which I need to be loose. I need to get in these weird positions. Lifting, you're trying to become a fridge. Again, there's different ways of training to not lose that, but
Right.
a lot of the main hammers are going to be compound lifts for building strength. And again, my adaptations were so strong, I had to undo that to an effect because anytime I tried to train, even if it was a lighter deadlift, I would treat it like a 700-pound deadlift. So I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
let go of the adaptations without kind of getting rid of them altogether.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, it's everything became a high threshold strategy, right?
Right.
So whether I was, doing an arm drag or I was trying to use some kind of Bravo grip, like it was just full send. And
Yeah, which is
this is
helpful.
really interesting, but I've been listening to some stuff from George Brooks and
Yeah.
Lactate, and he said something really recently that I thought was super interesting. It caught my attention, but he said, you know, um, upper body stuff is, it's more fast twitch type 2 fibers because they're not crazy endurance fibers. When I think back to when I started in jiu-jitsu, you're trying to bench press guys, you're trying to grip them down and hold them, and I was like, holy shit. So like here I am like trying to use my upper body strength, which was, sufficient, maybe a great survival mechanism, but it was just causing this massive production of lactate, which, can be used for energy, but I'm like, I'm just gassing myself out. Like I am
Right.
causing like such a deficit. And so, I mean, I've kind of gone the same way as you, where the priority's been on, more conditioning capacity stuff
Mhm.
and just, I would say a retention of strength. Like I don't find it as useful.
Right, and it's weird coming from a strength and conditioning background is that again a lot of our main tools are gym lifts, which is fine, but it almost made me redefine how I thought about football. Even when I was playing, and not that strength and conditioning doesn't have a place. I think it absolutely does, but I
Mm-hmm.
think all the guys who were the best, and a lot of them either didn't go to the gym, were slackers, but they were all the dudes who were like super chill and good athletes, and they never lost that athleticism by implementing archaic lifting strategies, right? Because when you're a kid, you're not like taking control of your training. You're just listening to to your strength and conditioning coach, which
Yeah.
them come from the same background, and we were lifting like, anyways. It was just I felt like the adaptations didn't suit the sport, and then I look at jujitsu and almost to a different degree, I think that there's way more crossover between traditional strength training and football, let's say, for that particular sport, depending on
Yeah.
what you do. But jujitsu is almost like, unless you're an ultra heavy in stand up where you're never actually going into a lot of those deeper positions, I don't think it's that helpful outside of like a base level understanding and range of motion. But the second range of motion starts to decrease to get more weight is the second I think it stops being useful. So you can make a play for full range of conditioning or full range of motion bodybuilding if you would adhere to it. But again, if you look at basic strength standards, it's all leveraged off of bench, squat, deadlift, and then everything's built out from there. I don't know. I feel like they're just not the appropriate adaptations in my mind. But
Yeah.
let's say you have no strength, like you're not me, you're not a master, then yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think it does have 100% carryover to a point if you don't lose the qualities that you inherently make you good at, which is where everyone goes wrong. They lose they lose their ability to move the more stronger they get, and they utilize they just start cutting depth, I guess, so to speak, or whatever. But they get so locked into a certain lift that they then lose the ability to do that stuff. And that's where it's kind of cool seeing some of the coaches now training. I can't remember their names, but a lot of the people in our space, they're actually like doing a lot of like weird lifts, odd lifts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has more carryover just because we're trying to train athletes, not powerlifters, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I know my body felt a lot better when I started rolling around on the ground
Yeah,
because it was so stiff. I mean, because I started shortly after that tactical strength. I think it was either,
I
or it was
remember.
probably a year after
Yeah,
COVID. And man, my body was just, it was a mess. I mean, I was as strong as I'd ever been. I looked great. I carried probably about 10 pounds more muscle, but
yeah,
man, like I flared up my sciatica. Like I did some stupid stuff that just, it kind of pushed me over the edge. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I mean, if I get to I'm closing in on a 700-pound deadlift, I'm like, but I don't know if it's worth it at this point. Like, is this really what I want to do? Because I mean, I was an athlete too. Like I like to feel athletic. I want to be able to move, and I was a fucking Lego man. I mean, I could literally just like not turn. And as soon as I started hitting the mats, man, within weeks, like a couple weeks, my hips just felt great. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of like moving again. Like, and it's been so much better since then.
Well, it's like, again, I remember this one moment. So I was in Jamaica with Stronger Experts, with Coach Cav, basically training Jamaican sprinters. And so one of the ones was Johan Blake. So he came out, did the whole thing, and then all of us got to race him. Okay, and we're filming.
Oh my god!
Like I'm not at my biggest at that point, but I was trying to be as big as possible. So I was probably like 235, and I'm about 210 right now. But I lost a lot of muscle, but I don't lose a lot, but I lost a lot of weight. I remember going, and I'm like, I'm fast. I was the fastest guy on the team. A Canadian clock 4:44, but probably 4:06 laser time. But fast enough, okay? Like I was a DB, whatever. I was always fast. That was my thing. I go there and like I got fucking waxed. Obviously, he was in one of the pinnacles of his career at that time. He's coming off the pinnacle, but he's still fast enough. And he gave us like honestly like a 15-meter head start and just fucking waxed us. But
I don't think that's enough.
No, I couldn't. It felt so slow, and I was upright. My legs were like so internally rotated because I had nothing, and I was like, what the fuck is that? And like I hadn't sprinted in like since I was done college, basically, and I had lost it. I had completely lost. I couldn't rotate. Like I said, my heels just flared out. Like I looked like I was just an unathletic piece of crap, and that was kind of the start of like my brain turning. I'm like, man, like I lost it by getting strong. And stopping doing the sport, I think there's an argument for that, but like lost it completely. And like rolling around, you kind of feel like you haven't lost it, but you kind of understand like, oh, like if I don't change something, I can't roll on the ground, even just a little bit without like hurting your shoulder.
Yeah,
which is kind of sucks. Like
so I just want it all, man. I just want to do it all. I don't want any of the negative consequences. Like, why can't this happen?
Well, I think it plays to like, I don't know what's obviously smart programming is going to be the goal. Like, and if you're a coach and you can do this stuff, you can kind of prioritize stuff. But I think a lot of us probably have a similar experience where we don't know what we lost because we thought we wanted something, but it takes so much to get some of those old qualities back. It almost would have been better if I just kept them in the mix. And I don't necessarily want to say I regret it because I don't regret much, but I wish I would have kept those athletic qualities while training, even powerlifting. I don't think it would have affected my bottom line too much. And I ended up quitting anyways. So I lost all of this stuff over like a subpar powerlifting total, which was like good for like my level, but it wasn't like amazing. And I lost everything.
Yeah.
Just by not sprinting and jumping and just keeping it in the mix. So, I mean, yeah. Priorities.
Yeah, it's crazy. I try to tell that to people. I'm like, I mean, I was strong. I was not even in the conversation of elite, right? But for most people, clients, I'm like, look, I don't think you understand how good people are at certain things. Like, you see me and you see I'm really strong and I might be the strongest person I'm like, but my deadlift for my weight class is like only like 60% of what the best person is doing right now. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's such a difference. Dude, they're closer to me than I am to the elite people.
Dude, I quit because of that exact reason. So I remember at the Arnold, I was going to I didn't deadlift this. I bombed out on deadlift because I was stupid. I missed 705 opener, but I didn't miss it. Like I kind of, my grip went out a little bit and they're like called it downward motion. I was like, fuck that. I'm going to 745. It was like, that's just my mentality. But if I would have got 745, it would have been, I think, the third best deadlift of all time at 198 at that time. Within, I want to say 6 months, that wouldn't even have made the top 20. It's like all the people kind of came out. This would have been like 10 years ago. And they're like, oh, yeah. All the freaks started coming out. And not even the freaks, just kind of the outlier freaks. We still know how strong people are going to be because they're all in the NFL. But like that deadlift would not even be the top. I don't even know if it would be in the top 50 anymore. So it was like, man, I can't get any more out of my deadlift. Like, I'm done. And so it was like that was kind of the start of the end. I want to say like a year later, I was like, yeah, it's not worth it. Like, I can't get a 2,100 pound total. That's insane.
Yeah, I remember. I think I was trying to qualify for the Arnold one year because I'm in Cincinnati, so Columbus was
Mm-hmm.
like 2 hour drive, very close. And so I'm like, okay, if I do this local meet, it's a national qualifier. I can do that in the fall, and then I can go to the Arnold in the spring in March. And so I was training. I was like locked in, really trying to do this. I'm like, I need like a 440 Wilks or something around there, and it was going to be dicey. Like I didn't know if I was going to get there. It was a little bit of a stretch goal. I broke my leg that summer. Training's off, so can't do it. By spring, I hit my best squat ever. But at that point, like the qualifiers the next year around, the deadlifts were all like 50 pounds higher. I'm like, what? Like what happened? Like where do all these kids come from? And they were all probably 8 to 12 years younger than me at the time. Early 18 to 22. I'm like, I can't do it. Like I can't keep up with these kids. Like it's the game is escalated to a level that I think is incredible. But like,
Yeah,
I missed the boat.
and like I don't love powerlifting that much to like put my whole life into to be subpar.
Right.
Like like if I was gonna win, like at that time, like a third best deadlift like sounded pretty cool. I could like use that forever. Obviously, that wouldn't have held up the test of time, but like I'm winning like national championships of powerlifting with like totals that wouldn't even like make the Arnold anymore. Like I wouldn't. I don't even know if I'd qualify for elite anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked,
Yeah.
but like I wouldn't even qualify to get invited to the meet. And I'm like that sucks. Like I can't even. So then it would become a hobby sport, and to me, hobbies don't require me to get such good adaptations that I lose everything that's fun about life. But
Right.
I'd already lost it. So to some extent, you probably did too. It was like, well, that ship sailed. Like, fuck, I should have picked
And
it.
it's probably a good thing. Again, I mean, I was starting to get like pain. Like it was hard to deadlift heavy every single week. Like I was already spacing it out 10 days, 14 days. I'm like, I'm like getting close to the ceiling of my potential here. I'm like, I think it's probably over unless I want to take some gear, which I
Yeah.
really didn't to win a local competition. Like it seemed really dumb to me. I don't know. It was time to hang it up.
Well, it's interesting because like it was kind of all like kind of within like 5 years, I start like following Pat and looking at his models evolved over time. But like they were like looking at compression versus propulsion and all stuff, and I'm like, oh, this
Yeah.
is where I was on the arc, and now I'm like even beyond compression. And I can kind of like you were saying, I couldn't utilize, and I'm just starting to unwind that now. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
utilize a non-compression strategy for everything. And like
Yep.
obviously sometimes it's good. Like there's the times when I can use it, kind of like I was saying, redefining where I use, we'll call it aggression, but kind of just another term for that would be compression strategies. Like very, very small, minute spots that I have to pick. I, I didn't want to use it for arm drag or for like pretty much everything on the ground, like other than like maybe like top pressure. But even then, you can overdo it, and then you go flying the other way because it's an athletic
Mm-hmm.
sport. So it was just like, man, like I couldn't move within my body with any other strategy. And it's if you start to look at programming from a strategies perspective, for me the answer was like stop using that strategy like at all costs, which is very, very difficult when you're so strict into lifting. Is like everything's a deadlift. Well, I had to stop completely.
Everything is a deadlift. I actually went to see Bill Hartman when I was having some of that sciatic pain because
Mhm.
it got so bad, Dean, that we were on a family vacation and I could not sleep
Yeah,
at all. I mean, it was this like if I would go to sit down, it was just this writhing pain, and so I had to like lay on this really short couch and hang my leg off of it just so it would like stretch the back of my hip, and
yeah,
then I'd be up by like 4 a.m. unable to sleep, and I'd literally just go walk the strip down in Gatlinburg because that's the only time it felt good.
yeah.
So I went up to see Bill, and we kind of got into this like not a spat, but Bill's like, he's like, man, you're like super compressed. He's like, these are the things you need. This is you need to like stop doing some of this stuff. I'm like, okay,
Not
so
gonna.
what can I do, Bill? What can I do? He's like, well, you don't need to do anything because you've done a lot. Like you're super compressed. You need to learn how to relax and do these other things. I'm like, no, Bill. I'm like, I don't think you understand. I'm like, what do I do? He's like, well, you don't need to do anything. I'm like, no, Bill, I need to fucking like tell me what to do. He's like, man, he's like, you gotta chill. He's like, you're just in Batman mode. You're like ready to deadlift. at all times, he's like, you need to go the other side. I'm like, no, you're still not getting it, Bill. Like, what do I do? And it was kind of funny, but we had just had this back and forth. And it's like, compression got me into the problem. And I'm like, compression's going to get me out of the problem. And it was hard. But I mean, what ended up working was I literally had to like get my Calm meditation app out.
Yeah.
And like lay on my side and do these lazy rolls with my neck and then my trunk and my hips. And it took probably 2 weeks. It had cleared up and I've never had to deal with it again. But man, the initial of like getting out of that rut and like being forced to recognize what the other end of the spectrum is like was one kind of terrifying, but it was almost a necessity. Like at that point, I was in so much pain. I was like, I'll do whatever.
I have some experience with that. Like I had like a spat. I've never met Bill, but I had a spat with him on his app, just like in my inner monologue. I can't remember whatever the one that they have where he kind of like walks you through like the rebuilding process. I think it might be even called that. And I'm doing a horrible job selling it because I didn't end up doing it long term because of I was like, listen, I got a jujitsu thing to go. And like a lot of the answer is like, you need to learn how to calm down. But what I found value in at the beginning, and I still use some of this stuff, is those lazy rolls and stuff, because you realize how tense you are. You can't like melt in. It's almost like they're like, yeah, just like relax. And I'm like, I am relaxed. And then like 2 minutes later, everything starts to let go. And I'm like, oh, like I'm not relaxed. But incorporating that into daily movements, obviously, I probably should stop doing jiu-jitsu, which was where I had a spat. It's like I still can't take out some of the triggers. But sure. I think for me, I've been able to work around a lot of them. And obviously, I'm not 100% pain-free, but I can slowly, like that concept of letting go, at least in sporting practice, has offered not even relief, but like a performance upgrade, because and really just like trying to let my shoulders relax is kind of the big one. Like, don't like use my traps, just all this stuff that they kind of wrap up into like an easy package, and they go deep into PRI and all this stuff. But a lot of it's just like don't fucking use that strategy, which is easier said than done. But I think that
it's so easy. I think every like athletic person, competitive person probably struggles with this. Like I even have some of these conversations with some of my high school athletes, because I mean, that's the time of your life. Like, yeah, I know you're a baseball player, but you're still a high school dude who wants to look jacked. So you're going to throw in a bunch of exercises to make your arms juicy, to make your pecs juicy. Like I get all that, but like, bro, I still need you to be able to rotate and like swing a bat. Like your arms aren't going to do much when you're sitting on the bench because you can't rotate anymore. So like trying to just like bake some of this in early on so that they don't have to do as much as we did later has just been incredibly helpful. But at first they're kind of like, they're a little hesitant. And I get it. It's not fun. It's not sexy.
That's where the best guys, like I think about growing up, and even when I was a high school coach for football and all this stuff, the best guys, you didn't have to tell them to relax, because they were just like almost like to the point where they didn't care, but they could like down regulate by just being fucking not caring. But when you look at actual sports performance, a lot of that time, people who have those performance problems, they care too much. So like they could use a dose of that, and probably a heavy dose of that. But it doesn't seem like the road to success when you're like, yeah, I'm just going to hammer it. And it doesn't, and a lot of them see success, like myself included. Like I haven't really had a losing streak that was so bad I wanted to quit, but I knew I wasn't at the level in which I could be, which it's hard to let go. And it still is. Like I'm talking like I figured it out, but I haven't. I just like small doses of that have paid off such dividends. The non-training for me is kind of that part for like the training side of things. And then, like you said, meditation, but just breathing, like not caring. I'm not saying not caring, but finding like a different path to caring that isn't just tension and bull rushing it and all that stuff is like a skill that I think is very helpful to have both sides of things. And a lot of us lose it. And just classic strength conditioning, we don't even look at that because of, I wouldn't even say negative connotations, but it's kind of like, that's pussy shit or whatever, like however you want to conceptualize it. But a lot of it is like a thing that you think there's nothing to go there. Like there's no point of turning that stone over because it's stupid. And I'd almost argue the opposite 20 years later. But I also was that person, right? Like I know I was there.
Yeah, you get wisdom as you come up in the game, right? If I heard a guy our age talking about this, I'd be like, yeah, like he's just a dad now. He's like super soft, but it's like at this point I'm here, it's like I've seen some shit, I've done some shit, I kind of get the big picture, but it's trying to balance it. And I think especially American strength and conditioning,
Mm.
it's like very rooted in that football culture of, you know, use more force, more intensity, more motivation, like coach hard ass, like that is what it is. And you get some of this European stuff of like, you sprint and you do some pliers. We're like, get that weak ass shit out of here. Like we're not jumping around. Like we're gonna lift some heavy shit, and that's it.
Well, and like they're arguably like I would say a lot of the people that are successful like in American culture, even that environment, a lot of it's just survivorship bias. There's so many dead bodies along the way, and they're pretty
Yeah.
much where they are. They're all in the training industry with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like it's hard to like most of them don't get it till they're I'm going to say our age, but like till they're masters. But by then, like they've impacted so many people. So it's like now we're trying to undo a bunch of stuff and then apply it to athletes. And it's I don't know what the solution is. Obviously, I think it's just kind of is what it is. But like I think that there is merit to hopefully not repeating that cycle. But I don't think that that's happening really. But we can try a little bit.
I mean, if training's bad, like, do you work with any nutrition with any collegiate athletes or kids of that age?
I have a lot of it's jiu-jitsu athletes, but I have a few baseball players, and it's I don't know, like yeah, it's the same shit, man. Like it feels like nothing's changed, and like I'm sure it has, but it feels like nothing's changed, and that's not a bad thing. Like people are still successful. It's just I think that there's a lot of problems when again they don't make it, then they're us, and I think that you're like rolling the dice, and it's just I would hope for better. But that's like saying everything's bad. I don't actually believe that. I think that there's just some use to maintaining qualities or inserting them for people who don't have them. I think goes a long way, just for after the fact.
Yeah. So I'm curious, guys come to you for jiu-jitsu nutrition stuff. Is this like what's your primary focus with them? Is this guys who are looking to cut weight classes? Are they just looking to just improve their overall like longevity in the sport? What do they tend to be?
Yeah, like so for clarification, I work with like everyone, but I work for a company called View, at least at the moment, in terms of what I contract for, and they cover everyone. But they usually give me the people who want to build muscle, and if they put jujitsu in there, they're like, yeah, we'll send them to our token jujitsu guy. But no, I my model is based around, and a lot of this is all kind of this wisdom thing. It's like, what have I seen, and what do I think is effective? It ends up being this high flux model where it's just about increasing capacity, because I think we live in a world where food's high and activity's low. And so even with jujitsu people, a lot of them, when they have the money to do nutrition coaching, they're just masters. They're like usually, I don't see a lot of like young kids wanting to hire a nutrition coach. So it ends up becoming a lot of people like us, but come from a background where they don't have their diet. And a lot of them think that jujitsu is enough. And unless they're like training like professional athletes, a lot of times it isn't. So it's about getting general, like, and I'm talking nutrition here, but I'm talking output is their general overall activity is just enough. They're still sedentary even in that sport because it's such a small part of the day. And probably then they're like, well, I lift. It's like, well, like you lift for 15 minutes. Like, yeah, you're there for an hour, but there's not much expenditure. So try to get general overall activity up and increase flux, which is just, can we eat more and do more? And then again, through just utilization of resources, they can be in a deficit while having higher calories, which solves a lot of the environment problems of food, but then allows them to be able to fuel training and then essentially slowly cut. So basically, I'm about having deficits at higher calories, which means output has to come up. In a lot of cases, I find serves athletes really well that are at that age because, again, they start working a normal job, sit at a desk. Again, they're not active even though they think they're active, and then getting calories up because of that. Because what most people do, especially when they're trying to like have that midlife crisis, join a sport, lose weight, get cut, is they just hammer low calories, and then their performance suffers and or they get signs of red ass. But the main thing is they overtrain or they can't recover, but it's a food problem. And so, and then they can't white knuckle it. Like everyone thinks they're disciplined until they're hungry, and then they can only last so long. So my main concept is, can we get that piece out of it? The main hammer isn't food low. It's actually food high, activity high. it would
I
be,
like it.
yeah.
I think John Berardi wrote a couple
Yeah.
papers like
Deflux.
years ago for T Nation on energy on G Flux or whatever he called it at the time. And man, I've always held on to that. I'm like, why would I like to eat and
Yeah.
I like shitty food. I
That's
mean, I
it.
eat a lot of healthy food, but like I want to eat some cheesecake or cheeseburger, right? And to me, it was always like, well, I'll just, I'm going to raise my output. One, because I think if you want to progress physically, like you got to put some work in. Like, I'm not saying anything
Mm.
crazy here, but like, why would I want to take my calories though? Like, that just sounds like ass.
But it's like, but that's like the mentality. And I say like, oh, jujitsu is like 100 years behind. But I'd say like the general sport, like cutting diet information is like at face level, at least people who aren't like in the industry, and most people who are, that's another argument. But but they're just seeing like, yeah, you got to get in a calorie deficit. It's like at the cost of the thing that they like to do is where it ends up becoming. And so like the high flux model generally covers all bases for the simple fact, let's just say they don't even like shit food. It's just they're inundated with that anyways. They have kids, their kids are going to eat ice cream and all this shit. Like it's going to be present. So instead of trying to say no to everything, try to include that in the plan, which again, the cost is they have to do more exercise or more activity, which they think that they're doing, but they're not. And
Right.
I want to use jujitsu. The better they get, the less output they're going to do for the most part. So like I joke with Jeb, but it's like you see all the brown belts just get fat, but it's because they're so good. They don't actually have to work that hard unless they have training partners at the same level. And even then they're alternating intensity so that they can get a training effect, but it's a training effect, not output, in terms of, we'll call it calories, but it's just not that hard. So
Yeah,
it's
you lose a bunch of
you have to like other shit because you're so good.
You lose a bunch of weight as a white belt, and then it slowly starts coming back the better you get at jiu-jitsu.
If you think back to like you're a blue belt, I'm a purple belt. We're not even like really that far down the road, but I expended so much energy as a white belt. Like it would take 2 days to recover. I couldn't even train like the amount I'm training right now because I was just everything was like 100% effort. I would love to see the calories on that. It might not be that good, but
I had to stop because I did it. Like I moved up from like 3 to 4 gi classes a week, and I think I fried my elbows because it was just all grips all day. I finished with like this.
Like that, I thought I like looking like elbow tendon. Like I just never had that problem until I did jiu-jitsu, and I was like, maybe if I just, so this is old mentality, if I just did more chin-ups, that would help. It's like, no, just like you're doing a million isometric chin-ups like for the week, like you're good. It was hard to kind of grasp that, to be honest.
I was like, I got it. I'll just do no gi. That'll solve.
Somewhat, that does help a little bit. But I thought it did, but it was just because there was no grips.
So weekly activity recommendations. Where's your? I mean, I would say most people I get them to shoot for 5 to 7 hours if I'm thinking a high flux. Yeah. Where are you at? How do you break it down to them?
Yeah, so like I try to use, and again, everyone can do different. I've changed my model a little bit, but in terms of coaching, it's very hard to use that. I'm thinking of overall MET scores. So MET scores is just like a metabolic equivalent. So it's like how hard is this thing? And trying to accumulate the most volume of MET scores per time that you have, right? Because as adults or as we have like stuff to do, kids, work, job, traveling, all this shit is like you're going to have a certain time. Trying to get the most amount of METs. What I find is that that ends up becoming more of an intensity thing. And so to get more METs, I look at it as what can you do the most and still recover from? Obviously, if you like to do jiu-jitsu, intensity is going to go up, but trying to hammer sprinting for 4 hours, you're not going to be able to recover and do it. So it ends up becoming, this is an easy way of saying walking. I think walking has some merit, but to go to the model I use generally, because it's the easiest, is probably step count. And then having workout frequency as this like hovering thing in the background that's stable, but we can't calculate it because we have no fucking idea. Brown belt or the white belt, it's like how many calories? Like I don't know. Like who the fuck knows? So it's frequency, and then trying to bring up, we'll call it neat, but just overall MET scores outside of that. Usually using a step count. So again, the most effective I find if you're trying to lose weight, probably somewhere north of 12,000, which is like again, we're talking like athletes who want to lose weight, but like if they're gonna bitch about it, it's like, wow, it's fucking 12,000 plus. And they're like, well, I get like 3 now. I'm like, well, I don't know. Like my friend said 8,000 is the right number, and it is for a lot of benefits of health. but it's not enough a lot of times to move the weight loss needle. And I would say that's a starting point. And so 8,000 would be like, hey, your bases are covered, but you're probably not going to use that as a weight loss hammer unless training's up a lot, which can happen. And then it's becoming, what can we manage in terms of the most amount of, I guess, low recoverability stuff?
Yeah.
But the second it starts affecting your training, that's when we pull back or increase food. And so if the main thing we're trying to push is the training, you obviously need a certain amount of allocation of resources and recovery for that. Try to bring up steps enough to move the needle, but not enough to kind of fuck up your training, and then feeding up to that. And how you kind of increase capacity would be obviously getting better over time, or slowly, like if we can bring calories up as a recovery tool, assuming they're sleeping, they're relaxing, they're whatever recovery modality, sauna, whatever the fuck works for them, you dipping into that well as much as we can, but also realizing that food in a deficit is another stress. And so trying to figure out the lowest amount of deficit we can to lose weight, and then can they keep doing it? But that's a question that ends up becoming, who knows? A lot of it's based on workout frequency and goal, and then how much steps we can bring up, and then food. So using food as the last hammer is kind of how I do it, as opposed to the first one, which if it's the first one and the hardest one, NEAT drops and performance drops. So it's like, now we're not even using the tool that we like to do, and we're getting shittier at it because we're eating less. It works, but it's not usually they don't look the way they want to look in most cases.
Yeah, I don't think most people realize how much of an effect NEAT has. I know when I was back in the day, 20 years ago now probably, I did bodybuilding. And those last phases, I mean, I'm always fidgeting or rocking or just even doing stuff like that when I'm sitting around. But I would be so idle like the last 4 weeks because calories were low. I was exhausted. Training was really high. I could feel it. Just the pup. My dog was like whining at me now.
I was like, is that my dog?
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't whine.
I'll cut this out. Ruby, go away. Go.
I think you keep it in. It's real.
We have 4 dogs. I might keep it in, yeah.
Stress.
But anyway, it was yeah, man, I just like it's a fatigue I can't describe, where I would just sit there and like I didn't even have enough capacity to think. Like I was
that's the main, like, so you think about a deep cut with bodybuilding, a lot of the adaptations that your body's trying to preserve, they're going to just down regulate NEAT. And I find that happens whether on purpose or not. The second they start jujitsu or running or whatever, like that down regulation, because they're like, I worked hard, intensity's up. They get that adaptation through just doing nothing. And then you stack on the fact that their job's inactive and that they watch Netflix or whatever. It's like you almost have to turn that switch on. Obviously, bodybuilding, they'll use cardio because it's like it's a hard way around that. Especially you just become a shell of yourself. But then there's still an argument for driving high flux as much as possible, even with bodybuilding. I did a podcast with Paul Need, and he utilizes it because of that same thing. Is like, it's a performance thing. It's a psychological thing. When just the second food starts getting lower, past the threshold for everyone, whatever that is, it's like stuff starts sucking. And it's crazy what your body will do, even unconsciously. Like, if you were to like film yourself, you probably look like someone who is sick and dying, because you kind of are to some degree. And
it's not far off. And gosh, I had one girl that I prepped for a figure contest. We used a high flux strategy with her. I'm like, there's no way. Like, I see some of these figure diets. It's 7+ hours a week of cardio plus 3 to 5 strength training sessions at 900 to 1200 calories a day. I'm like, there's no nutrition. Like, you could eat from a field of kale that has been sung to by angels and it wouldn't be enough nutrients. You know what I mean? Like, you just can't get enough nutrition and to function. And so we did a high flux approach, and she felt great and she was shredded, and it was way easier.
Well, that's kind of where this thing started to some degree. Like, it happened with a presentation for Ben's at Ben's place. I had to do like one. Anyways, I was researching this project, but a lot of it stemmed from what James Krieger did with, and Eric Salazar, but they just utilize. So he's a bodybuilder. He crushes. I want to say he's like in the 130s, but whatever, just fucking jack. But he utilized high flux from a capacity of also utilizing like the gravastat, which is just essentially adding an external weight via load of like a vest or whatever. But he never really dropped calories past a certain point. So let's just say he kept it at like 2,200 calories, and the lowest he got was like, I want to say 1,800. At his weight is insane. But he used external weight to drop, basically drop the weight through fat mass. Like there's a whole thing on the gravastat. I'm not going to go into it, but he replaced it. So basically high fluxes you can get plus utilizing that is that his calories stayed up. And although he's still in a deficit and he's still fatigued to some effect, the psychological aspect wasn't there, and there was still food incoming. So it's like, for whatever reason, a lot of those processes that keep you feeling good stayed good. And so you can have the same results. If anything, he had better results because he was able to train. And I think that that's the thing that you lose a lot of times in those deep cuts is like your training suffers, and there's lots of cardio. And it's not that there isn't cardio with steps, but it's like a weird psychological drain when you're on a treadmill staring at nothing as opposed to just existing in the world. And I think that there's a big carryover for that. And a lot of it's mental. You know what I mean? There's the numbers, but the mental thing goes a long way.
Absolutely. Man, we covered a lot of ground today. Kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it's because we were just like, let's do this thing.
Let's just swing it. No, it was great though. I want to be respectful of your time, man. So hopefully we can continue the conversation at another point. I know we'll be chatting on Instagram and everything else. So where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so my website is Get Fluxed, so GTFLUX.ed.ca. So Get Fluxed. The main spot though is going to be walk.more.king on Instagram. I'm not going to get
for those listening, you've been on a treadmill this whole time.
Yeah, like I'm on a treadmill, but like, and I wouldn't say I'm the best walker in the world, but it's kind of like, it's my humorous attempt at everything I hate about the fitness industry. I'm just going to be the opposite. And so I don't know if I'm a troll, so to speak, but I find it ironic. And so the name probably isn't as funny as people think, but I like it. So, and it stuck. So like, I mean, I can't undo it now because I have no idea what I would put my Instagram name as. Instagram is
I try to tell people outside of the fitness industry or people outside of jiu-jitsu that we need beef in the fitness industry like they have in jiu-jitsu. Those guys know how to beef. Like, we go backdoor at it with like little quips about ATG, or a lot of the sprint guys will kind of dog on each other. But no one goes hard in the paint like the jits guys.
Well, that's why I kind of like having both. It's because like, and I always like being big for that simple fact. Because I came into the fitness industry with an elite total. And so I go and I'm like, I'm going to be a trainer now. I'm going to quit teaching, be a trainer. And I was like, man, I'm stronger than everyone. And I'm not even that strong in the world we're talking about. I'm like, this is crazy. Yeah. So like we're in a fitness industry and no one's in shape. Anyways, that's a whole different thing. But they all have very strong opinions that don't work for the most part. Yeah. So there's that. And the strength and conditioning world is probably very similar. So
we're opening a whole nother can of worms that
we'll end on that so that everyone can figure out whatever they want from there.
That's a teaser. Well, man, just hang on the line for just a second until this uploads, and then I appreciate you, and I'll make sure we get some links to your content.
Yeah, man. That was good. I'm glad we did that.
Yeah.
It's funny because like we talked about all this stuff to some degree, but I don't want to get too much into the training thing because it's just like, I don't know. It's at this point, like, it's not that I don't like training, but I've seen like all the models and it's like, I don't even know if everyone knows what they're doing at this point, to like in a good way. Like it's kind of all works and it all doesn't. But
yeah, I'm not even going to touch that one.
I love Bill's stuff before I go. Yeah, I was the guy, so I didn't want to say this because I actually love the program for people who are going to do it. But they were like, yeah, you literally, if you're the person who's like, I'm not going to give up my thing to like get out of the pain triggers, I was like, fuck, like I'm not. Like, and I just couldn't because I was like, well, like I'm trying to get rid of knee pain, but I can't just stop jiu-jitsu. Like you have to stop. And I'm like, well, like, fuck, I'll take a little bit of knee pain then because I'm like, I only have so many years. Like, I know it's not going to get better. They're like, it might take a year to get better. I'm like, yeah, like, I can't. I just don't have the time. Which is like, it's not that your thing doesn't work. It's just like it doesn't work. I'm not going to do it. So like, is there a solution? They're like, no, there's no other solution. It's like, well, I'm going to find one, and I still might not. But
I'll deal with it. It's fine. It's worth it. I'll say right below the threshold and just ride that until I feel like I need to deal with it,
I might
which
change
maybe never.
Yeah, like I actually started doing like low key. I'm doing like range of strength. The Canadian guy that does all the
Oh yeah.
um, and I actually have felt such relief doing his stuff. And I would say his is like would be the equivalent of trying to compression your way out of stuff, but it's actually like lifting with range of motion stuff, and I feel fucking 10 times better. But it's like I'm 4 months in, and I still have probably 3 years to go before I reach any of the standards, and it's like I don't know. It's been good anyway.
Whatever, man. If it works, like do it. I think.
Well, that's what I mean. Like you can't say something that works. Like I'm basically like a broken down, tried everything. Like at this point, I don't even know what I'm undoing. I just need to like. It's like there is no one solution. We're all kind of fucked now.
And a lot of the stuff people choose, it's the same stuff. It's just the way we describe it is different, but it's the same stuff.
For instance, I did Pat's model. I was like, yeah, fucking, this is the model. And then they changed everything. And then you kind of go down the PRI rabbit hole, and they're like, well, yeah, you got to start with the cranium. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't fucking say that. You said the primaries. And like, yeah, but it doesn't work unless you do this. I'm like, yeah, but you don't tell us that till after 3 courses. So fuck you, motherfuckers.
Yeah. Anyway, you're telling me now that I should have got braces like a year ago. This is not helpful.
And they changed it. They're like, yeah, but if you are this thing, this is like, and Bill kind of combated them with all this, and I'm just like, man, they can't even figure it out amongst themselves. I just, yeah. Anyways, I'm sure
they're on to something, but there's like this little pocket of dissent that I think is probably more confusing to everybody. Than anything
because of it. And so it's like, well, fuck, I invested like 3 years in this and like it didn't work, and then you're telling me it wouldn't have worked anyways. So I was like, well, then why did I do it?
I feel like every trainer gets into that PRI rabbit hole. I think a lot of it, honestly, like I feel like our job, I mean, as a trainer, nutrition, I think it can be way more challenging because of the mental and emotional side with that. But training is pretty fucking easy. It really is. And people don't want to hear that. Yeah, I think a lot of it is we want to stay intellectually stimulated, and so we find our way into all this shit, and then we end up forgetting, like, training's not that hard.
So, like, that's, I can't, like, say that out loud, but that's part of the reason why I quit. I was like, I'm just using, like, my brain to, like, learn all this shit and try to fix something that, like, I'm just going to quit and just see what happens. And you know what happened? Nothing. I was like, fuck. Like we probably all have the same courses. I have like fucking $20,000 in rehab and DNS and PRI and fucking, and I haven't used any of it because it's just like, yeah, you just like do whatever feels good, man. It can work.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel shameful, like thinking when the first big one for guys our age was probably like the functional movement screen, and like I cringed thinking like I had people overweight, like rolling around on the floor. Like, what the fuck was I doing? Yeah, man. Why did somebody be like, come on, you dumb motherfucker. Look at what you're doing. Like, just go outside and push a sled for an hour. Like, it's way more useful than what you're doing.
Right? And then it's like, but even now, and like, so like Pat had a post recently about like the farmers' cares. I'm like, man, like I get what you're saying, but like, man, again, you're more fucked up than everyone too. I know he is. So it's like, man, maybe they should just do that because it's like they feel good and like. So it's like,
man, I love Pat. He's always down to stir some shit up.
Oh man, it's the best. Like that's what the best is. I remember he was like teaching his course or whatever, and he's like, yeah, I don't even do any of this shit. He's like, what I need to do is make enough money where I could pay a trainer to make me do that. And I'm like, well, you're not going to listen to it anyway. He's like, I know. So man, he's the best.
If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to rate and review us with 5 stars only. Then subscribe so you can get all the latest updates.